Karoline Leavitt's assistant peeked in. "The president is hosting an informal gathering in the Roosevelt Room with some guests. He asked if you could join." Karoline gave a nod. "I'll be right there." As she stepped into the Roosevelt Room, she immediately saw the president deep in animated conversation with several visitors. Among them stood a familiar figure, Elon Musk, accompanied by a young boy who could only be his son, A-Xii. The president motioned her over. "Karoline, come meet our guests." She crossed the room, exchanging greetings and handshakes. When she reached Musk, he offered her a warm welcome. "This is my son," he said, indicating the boy beside him. The child looked up, his eyes curious, older than his years. His gaze was intense, almost piercing, as if he could see through every layer of her carefully maintained composure. "Hello," Karoline said, lowering slightly to meet his eye level. "It's nice to meet you." The boy remained silent, his eyes fixed on her with a gaze that was unsettling in its depth. Straightening, she turned back to the adults. The conversation flowed, from policy to lighter banter, but throughout she could feel the boy's eyes following her. More than once, she caught him observing her with the same thoughtful intensity. As the gathering wrapped up, Karoline politely excused herself. There were briefing papers waiting and a press conference to prepare for. But just as she reached the door, she felt a light tug at her sleeve. Looking down, she saw A-Xii, his hand outstretched with a folded piece of paper. "This is for you," he said softly, his tone steady. Before she could respond, he had already returned to his father's side. Karoline, puzzled, slipped the paper into her pocket. Whatever it was, it would have to wait. For now, duty called. Hours later, after a stream of non-stop meetings, Karoline finally returned to her office. A dull headache was forming, and the weight of the day sat heavily on her shoulders. The news about her mother had been buried under tasks, but now, in the quiet, it surfaced again. She collapsed into her chair, loosening her collar. Her hand brushed something in her pocket, the boy's note. She had completely forgotten. Curious, she retrieved the folded paper. Children often gave White House staff little drawings or innocent questions. She unfolded it, expecting scribbles. Instead, it was neat handwriting, far too mature for his age. "God told me that you carry a sadness no one else sees, but He sees everything, even that. He said you're strong because you keep going, even when it's hard. He loves you, truly, and He wants you to know you're safe with Him. You're never too far from His love." Karoline stared at the message, reading it once, twice, a third time. Her hands trembled. How could this child know? How could anyone? The fear of losing her mother, the crushing pressure of her role, the deep, isolating loneliness. These were secrets she had never shared. Since childhood, faith had been part of her. But lately, it had faded. Her career left no space for reflection, much less prayer. She couldn't recall the last time she'd prayed with sincerity, not just a rushed plea in panic. This note cut straight through her armor, and the fact it came from a child, a stranger, made it strike even deeper. A knock jolted her. She quickly folded the note and slid it into her drawer. "Come in," she called, her voice catching despite herself. Her assistant entered, another stack of briefings in hand. "These just came from State. They need your sign-off before tomorrow." "Thank you," Karoline said, taking the folders. "Anything else?" "Just a reminder about the 8 p.m. strategy call tonight." After her assistant left, Karoline found herself opening the drawer once more, retrieving the note. The words seemed to hum with their own strange energy. She recalled the boy's eyes, how they had seemed to pierce through her, seeing things no one else could. Was it real? Could a child truly receive such a message? Or was it some bizarre, elaborate joke? She pulled out her phone, typing in a search about Musk's son. Articles appeared about his unique name and rare public outings, but nothing explained what had unfolded today. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. Karoline went through the motions, meetings, documents, phone calls, but her thoughts kept circling back to the folded paper in her drawer. By evening, the White House was nearly deserted. Only security and essential staff remained. After her final call, she was left alone with her thoughts. She opened the drawer again, running her fingers across the words. Something cracked inside her, a dam built from stress, fear, and isolation. For the first time in years, Karoline Leavitt allowed herself to cry. The next morning, her alarm blared. She had barely slept. The note's words had echoed endlessly in her mind. After a quick shower, she dressed out of habit, preparing for the usual onslaught. But something was different. Despite exhaustion, a strange weight had lifted. She couldn't bring herself to leave the note behind. It stayed folded in her blazer pocket. As she applied mascara, her phone rang. Her father's number lit up the screen, twisting her stomach. News about her mother, surely. "Dad, is everything okay?" "The doctors want to try a new treatment," he said, cautious hope in his voice. "Something experimental. They've seen good results in similar cases." Hope, fragile, but there. Karoline clutched the phone tighter. "When do they start?" "Next week. The oncologist said she's a strong candidate." After the call ended, she stood still. Her hand drifted instinctively to her pocket. Was this mere coincidence, or something greater? Later at the White House, she learned that Musk and his son were scheduled to return that afternoon, part of a new technology initiative the president was launching. The news triggered an unexpected flutter in her chest. Her morning briefing went smoother than usual. The press felt less combative, or perhaps she simply projected more certainty. When a reporter challenged the administration's stance on renewable energy subsidies, Karoline responded with crisp clarity, surprising even herself. "Well handled," the communications director told her. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up." By lunchtime, Karoline found herself watching the West Wing entrance, waiting for Musk and his son to appear. She felt foolish, a grown woman anticipating a child's arrival. What would she say? How could she explain what his note had done to her without sounding utterly unprofessional? They finally arrived while she was in a meeting with the chief of staff. Through the glass walls, she caught sight of them being led down the hallway. The boy looked smaller in daylight, his hand tightly gripping his father's. 30 minutes crawled by before she could excuse herself, but by then they had already entered the Oval Office. Karoline lingered near her assistant's desk, pretending to read a folder. "They'll be in there at least an hour," her assistant said, clearly seeing through the act. "I'll let you know when they're out." "That's not necessary," Karoline replied quickly. "I just need to hand the president these polling figures at some point." An hour later, the Oval Office doors opened. The president stepped out first, followed by advisors, then Musk. The boy trailed behind, scanning his surroundings with open curiosity. When his eyes found Karoline's, he smiled, a small, knowing smile that made her heart jolt. She returned a slight nod. The president spotted her. "Karoline, perfect timing. We're heading to the Roosevelt Room for a quick lunch. Join us." She couldn't decline a direct invitation. As they walked, she found herself beside the boy. He glanced up with those quietly penetrating eyes. "Did you read it?" he asked in a low voice. "I did," she replied, matching his tone. "How did you know?" He shrugged. "I just knew. God told me you needed to hear it." His simple answer rendered her speechless. Children often spoke of God with such certainty, something adults had long forgotten. But this felt deeper, more real. In the Roosevelt Room, as conversation shifted to innovation and tech policy, Karoline kept glancing at the boy. He behaved like any normal child, restless, sometimes distracted. And yet that odd awareness lingered in his presence. When lunch ended and people began to disperse, Karoline gathered her nerve. She approached Musk and his son. "I wanted to thank X for his note," she said, addressing the father, though her eyes remained on the boy. "It meant a lot to me." Musk looked surprised, then down at his son with a curious, proud expression. He has a knack for catching people off guard. The boy gazed up at her. "God sees you," he said simply. even when you think nobody does?" The words struck Karoline like a wave, but before she could respond, they were already being ushered away. They were being ushered away to their next appointment. Karoline watched them go, the boy's hand once again nestled in his father's. She felt it deep in her chest. Something important had just taken place, though she couldn't yet explain what. The weekend came cloaked in relentless rain, mirroring the storm inside her. Despite the comfort the note had offered, reality remained unchanged. Her mother was still ill, her job still demanded perfection, and the crushing pressure hadn't let up. Saturday morning found her in her apartment, surrounded by briefing notes and policy memos. The White House never truly shut down, and neither did she. Her phone vibrated nonstop with questions, updates, and requests too urgent to wait for Monday. Around noon, her father called. "The new treatment," he said, his voice cracking. "The insurance won't cover it. They're calling it experimental. Denied the claim." The cost was staggering, far beyond what her parents could manage, even with her financial help. She promised to make calls, to try something, anything. But the hopelessness in her father's voice echoed her own rising despair. After the call, she sat frozen, eyes fixed on the rain-slicked city beyond her window. The note from X lay on her coffee table. She kept it close now, rereading it whenever the fear crept back in. She picked it up again, slowly tracing the words. "God sees everything," it read. But where was God when her mother needed care they couldn't afford? Where was He in the cruel machinery of politics and bureaucracy? Anger churned in her chest, not toward the boy who wrote the note, but at the universe, the system, and her own helplessness. She crushed the paper in her fist, then quickly uncrumpled it, smoothing it with trembling hands. The words were still legible. Then her phone rang again, this time the White House line. A diplomatic crisis was unfolding, and they needed her to draft an immediate response. Then came emails, rumors of a press leak. Then more texts from her father, detailing the insurance denial. It was all too much. Something in her fractured. She grabbed her keys and coat and stormed out into the rain without any clear direction. The downpour soaked her within moments, but she barely noticed. She walked aimlessly, the city's noise drowned out by the roar of her thoughts. Eventually, her feet brought her to the National Cathedral. She hadn't planned it, hadn't been inside a church in years, except for formal events. But something pulled her toward the great wooden doors. Inside, it was quiet, nearly empty. A few tourists spoke in hushed tones, their voices lost beneath the cathedral's vaulted ceilings. Karoline slid into a pew in the back, water dripping from her coat, pooling at her feet. She sat in silence, listening to the rain tapping against the stained glass. The strong, polished press secretary facade slipped away. In its place was someone raw, scared, and overwhelmed. She clutched the note, now damp but still readable. "You're never too far from His love," it said. The words, once comforting, now felt like mockery. Her voice trembled in the empty air. "I need more than words," she whispered. "I need help, real help." A woman approached quietly, older, wearing a volunteer badge and a look of gentle concern. "Are you all right, dear? You're soaked." Karoline tried to smile, to summon her usual poise, but found she couldn't. "I'm fine," she said hoarsely. "Just needed a quiet place." The woman nodded. She didn't believe her, but respected the need for silence. "Sometimes the quiet is where we find answers," she said. "Take all the time you need." When the woman walked away, Karoline closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she prayed, not the rote prayers of childhood or the desperate bargains of recent months. A real honest whisper to whatever might be listening. "I don't know if you're out there," she murmured. "I don't know if that boy really heard from you, or if it was just a strange fluke. But if you are real, if you see me, I need help, not comfort, not words." Help tears came, silent and unrelenting. In the cathedral's vast quiet, Karoline Leavitt finally allowed herself to break. She didn't know how long she stayed there, tears and rainwater mixing on her cheeks. But eventually, a strange stillness settled over her. Not peace, exactly. Not resolution. But the soft, heavy calm of letting go. She had reached the edge of what she could control. As she stood to leave, her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. Miss Leavitt, this is Elon Musk. My son has been very insistent about speaking with you again. Would tomorrow be possible? It seems important to him. She stared at the message, stunned. Was it real? Exhaustion made her doubt even what was in front of her. How had he gotten her number? Why would his son want to see her again? With shaking fingers, she typed a response. Yes, that would be fine. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the city washed clean by the storm. She agreed to meet them at a quiet cafe near the National Mall, neutral ground, far from the pressures of the West Wing. She arrived early, selecting a table in the corner. The cafe was nearly empty, a few tourists enjoying their coffee. She ordered one herself, hands wrapped around the warmth of the cup, ignoring the flutter in her chest. What could the boy possibly want to say now? And why had Musk, one of the busiest men in the world, agreed to arrange it? At exactly 10 a.m., they arrived. Musk offered a polite nod, guiding his son with a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out a chair for the boy. X has been very persistent. The child looked at her with those same quiet, unsettling eyes. Today he seemed more focused, more grounded. He held a small backpack tightly in his lap. "Hello again," Karoline said, uncertain how to begin. "Hi," the boy answered. He looked up at his father, who gave an encouraging nod. "I had another dream about you." Goosebumps prickled her skin. "A dream about your mom," he added, his tone calm, factual. Musk looked startled. "X, we talked about boundaries." "It's okay," Karoline cut in gently, her voice almost a whisper. How did you know that?" He shrugged. "God told me, like last time." He unzipped the backpack, pulling out a folded check. "Dad said I could give you this, for your mom's medicine." Musk looked distinctly uncomfortable, but didn't intervene as the boy slid the check across the table. Karoline stared, frozen. When she finally picked it up, her breath caught. The amount written was more than enough to cover the treatment. And then some. "I can't accept this," she said quickly, pushing it back. "It's too generous." "It's not from me," Musk said softly. "It's from X, from his trust fund." He insisted. Karoline looked at the boy. He was watching her with his face was far too serious for someone so young. "God said your mom's not done yet," he said simply. "She still has grandkids to meet one day." The words struck Karoline like a blow. She had never spoken of that dream, not to anyone at work, not even in passing. It was hers alone. The quiet hope that, once she had built her career, a family might follow. A future filled with laughter, little hands, and second chances. A future she feared might never come. "How could you possibly know that?" she whispered. The boy's smile was clean, unguarded, untouched by the sharpness of adult suspicion. "I just listen," he said. Musk shifted slightly, clearing his throat. "I've stopped trying to explain these things," he said quietly. "You can call it intuition. You can call it something more. All I know is, when he feels something like this, he's usually right." Karoline looked down at the check again, her hands shaking. The number written across it was staggering. Enough for the treatment. More than enough. Her training kicked in. Every protocol. Every ethical boundary. "I can't," she said, shaking her head. "This would be inappropriate. I work for the government. You do business with the government. This could be perceived—" "It's not a bribe," Musk interrupted, calm and firm. "It's from my son, to someone who needs help. If you're worried about optics, we'll run it through a foundation. Quietly. Anonymously." She turned her gaze to the boy, seeking some angle, some hidden intention. But there was nothing there but sincerity. "Why?" she asked him softly. "Why me?" The boy looked at her, eyes open, voice clear. "Because you're sad inside," he said, "but you're still nice on the outside. And because God said to." His words cut through every cynical defense she had. In a world where every kindness had strings, where generosity was just a tool in a game of power and leverage, the boy's words, his reason, were almost too simple to accept. "Take it," he said again, quiet but insistent. "Please." And in that moment, Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary known for her composure, her discipline, her unshakable calm, felt tears rise in her eyes. Not the hot, helpless tears of frustration she'd shed in the cathedral. These were different. These were the tears of someone who, after everything, still wanted to believe in grace.